All right. Happy Sunday. Um, let's see here. It looks like we've got everything set up. Okay, fantastic. Again, welcome to the live stream. What we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be working through how I write content in product management. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Clement. I am a principal product manager at Blend, and I'm the co-founder of Product Manager HQ, which is a community of product managers, as well as the founder of Product Teacher. So one of the things that I do is I regularly write about product management, and I regularly do speaker events. And so one of the things that I hear folks ask for a lot is, hey, Clement, how do you actually write this content? How do you make sure that it's compelling, given that there are so many other people who are out there writing content, right? How do I stand out? So what I'm doing here is basically inviting you behind the scenes to see how I typically create my content, kind of what that ideation process looks like, outlining all the way to working through drafts. So based on what happened on Patreon, we do a monthly poll. And so the topic that we picked for the upcoming article is deciding what kind of product manager you want to be. So with that, I am going to start working through this. Always a fun challenge to kind of work through all the different topics as well as the different ways that might play out. So first off, I think one of the things I probably want to do is I'm going to start with an outline. I always start with the outline. So that way I can try to figure out, what are the key points that I want to go through, and then use that to then actually start writing. So I think in terms of deciding what kind of PM you want to be, right? So I also typically do the introduction last because the introduction typically has a lot more punch to it. If you can connect it with kind of the rest of your article, which you can't do if you haven't written it yet, right? So I typically leave the intro for last. And so it's probably going to be something along the lines of how, product market fit as a PM enables you to do much more. Or maybe it's something more like lots of different kinds of PM. How do you choose, right? So some sort of hook there. Not quite sure what I want to do there yet. So we've got the intro. And then I think first off, it's always helpful to begin with a framework, right? So what is the framework for deciding? So let me think through this. So in terms of framework for deciding, right? I think first off, there's more of like the top down or like proactive, and then like bottoms up, which is reactive. And what I mean by that is from a top-down perspective, right, we can always say, hey, these are the kinds of roles that I'm aiming to be. And so this is more like planning, directionally where you want to go. And then for bottoms-up reactive, what I'm trying to get at here is a lot of times we only figure out what kind of PM we want to be after we've been in a couple of different kinds of PM roles. And so as an example for me, I've been an integrations PM, I've been a user experience PM, I've been kind of a 0 to 1 PM launching something. I've been a scaling PM, right? So basically, how do you take something and make it really, really big? And so a lot of times, kind of, you're going to be exploring through your own experiences and then kind of reflecting on that, right? So something like that. It's not perfect yet. This is all very much kind of a first draft, right? So let's just kind of get all of our thoughts down on paper, and then once they're down on paper, then we can start wrestling through with it. I think one of the things that's really helpful is to have some sort of inventory of the different kinds of product managers that there are, right? Kinds of PMs or different kinds of attributes. So I'm not sure yet. We'll work through that in a sec. I think one of the key things that is always really helpful to call out, right, is B to C vs B to B. I think there's a world of difference between business to consumer products. So, for example, Facebook, Google, Amazon versus B2B products. So things like Salesforce, Twilio, Stripe, because they fundamentally serve very different audiences. They have very different distribution models, and so they require very different skill sets from folks. So there's what I want to try to get to is I want to try to get to some set of contrasts, right? The thing I'm working through is, do I want to do some sort of like quiz? I don't know if that's too clickbaity or not. Kind of similar to like some sort of BuzzFeed quiz. I'm also not quite sure what that would look like on paper, so that's just one of the things that I want to think through. But let's work through this at least. So we've got B2C versus B2B. We've got new product launch vs scaling growth, right? Like these two are super different. Small company vs large company. And for some reason, I feel like I've covered something like this before. So I'm actually going to go look back at my own reference materials. I realize this is kind of partially a plug, but here I've written this book on breaking into product management. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look for where I talk about the different kinds of PMs, because I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before. So here on page 19, right, you can see that I've covered this before. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'm going to try to pull down some of this stuff and then see whether there is something I can do to accelerate this here, right? So let me just make this a little bit bigger for everyone. For-profit versus nonprofit. So what else do I have here? So there's distribution model. I don't know that I want to get into B2B2C. That seems a little bit too complicated for talking about what kind of PM we want to be. So there's funding, VC, VS, bootstrapped. I'm not sure. I don't know about this one yet because I don't necessarily think I can talk about it as cleanly. So I'm going to leave that for now. I also don't know that regulation of industry. Again, not sure that that's as clean as I want it to be. Basically, so taking a quick step back, right? Kind of like what is the pain that we're trying to solve here, right? So what is the pain that we're trying to solve with this article? So the problem statement really is many aspiring PMs don't know that there are different kinds of PMs, right? And so helping them understand that there are different kinds is valuable. But the point is not, that there are different kinds. There are other articles that have covered that. One of the ones that I actually have written in the past is this micro course in terms of different kinds of PMs. So micro course on different kinds of PMs. But that's not what we're trying to solve, right? Like what we're trying to solve is once you know that there are all these different kinds of PMs, how are you supposed to pick which one you want to be? And so that's what I'm trying to get to here. So once you do know the different kinds of PMs, how to decide which kind to be. And so like that's really the pain, right? Like whereas this is like a prereq. So one of the challenges that I need to work through as I'm writing this is the difference in terms of audience for how much experience they have, right? Maybe they are an aspiring PM and they just straight up don't know the different kinds of product managers, right? So I need to be able to help people like that. But on the flip side, there are also a lot of experienced PMs who are very curious on how do I decide what other kinds of product I want to do? Am I in the right vertical or specialization, or should I be moving, right? And so I think one of the challenges, like this one is aspiring PMs, but I'm almost kind of wanting to go after experienced PMs. So this is more for experienced PMs and less for aspiring PMs. And so based on that, one of the things that I should do is I should let the reader know who I'm targeting, right? Because what I don't want to happen is I don't want an aspiring PM to try to read this and be like, I don't know any of the foundational concepts here. And so with that, I think we're going to go after the experienced PMs, right? Because it's almost unfair to go after an aspiring PM because they don't necessarily even know what product management is yet. And so kind of dumping them off the deep end is going to be really hard for them to digest. I'm not saying that we can't. I'm saying that it'll be harder to keep them up to speed without losing the attention of experienced product managers, right? So I'm going after experienced product managers then. Audience is experienced PMs. And so then I need to cover that in the intro to make it really clear that like if you're an aspiring PM, right, like this isn't the article for you. There are different ways for you to learn this. So not for you. This article isn't for you if you're aspiring. And so I think just this right here for all of us, fellow content creators or aspiring content creators, one of the things just to really keep in mind is anyone can run across your article on the internet, right? Like that is the magic of the internet. You have that really nice distribution. But the problem is that because anyone can see it, they're not necessarily the target reader that you want. And what you don't want to happen is you don't want people to have the perception of, wow, this author is very unfocused or is not really targeting my pain, right? And so the earlier on you can help people self-filter out, the better. As an example, Casey Winters is currently the head of product at Eventbrite, right? And so Casey Winters, and he makes it very clear when he's writing that this is not for aspiring PMs, right? Like when you launch products to customers, this basically automatically filters out everyone who is not yet a product manager. And so then now you know that, okay, Casey writes about experienced product management. He writes for kind of more leadership level folks. And so this is really, really helpful, right? I mean, like similarly, like Adam Nash, who used to be at Dropbox, right? Not this one, but this one. This would be a great product leader, right? Overly vague, how to communicate. And so this here basically automatically knocks out everyone who's an aspiring product manager because Adam doesn't spend any time talking about what it means to be in product, right? Kind of he assumes that you're already in product. And so the thing that I need to be careful with is when I'm talking about, deciding what kind of PM you want to be, I think even the premise is wrong, right? Like it's not even like deciding because that makes it sound too much like it's for aspiring PMs. It's more like discovering almost. And so discovering. So long story short, I need to go figure out how to work on the title. Need to work on the title so that we're more focused on existing PMs and not aspiring PMs. So that's what I need to go aim at. And then because of that, then that means that I don't need to go dive super deep on this inventory, and I can focus a lot more on the actual decision-making framework or the discovery. So there's that. And I think that's actually really good for us to have worked through because that means that then we can talk a lot more clearly about this kind of that bottoms-up approach. And so as an example, Clay Christensen, for those of you who don't know, he was a Harvard Business School professor. Unfortunately, he passed away last year. But he's the one who really focused on disruptive innovation. And one of the things that he was trying to do was this how will you measure your life here, which, by the way, really, really solid book. Oh, my ad blocker's not letting it open up. Come on. Okay, interesting. Anyways, in How Will You Measure Your Life, Clay Christensen talks about kind of these two different modes of tackling your career. One of them is this more proactive approach where you are doing this top-down planning, and the other one's more reactive. And so Clay actually took the reactive approach and actually made a very, very successful career out of it. And so I think one of the things that we need to be careful with is when we use the word reactive and proactive, the connotation, like the emotional tone of these words, is already very loaded, right? Like most people think that proactive is a good thing, and most people think that reactive is a bad thing. And the thing that I want to call out is there's nothing wrong with being reactive. It's simply one of many modes. And so one of the things that I need to do is I need to clarify that BTW reactive is not bad. So potentially I need to go like fix these words in terms of how I want to position it. I might find synonyms for it. For example, it might be experimental, right? Experimenting with kind of the current, with your current experiences, or I might say something more like experiential, right? And so like this might be more like hypothetical, and then this might be more like experiential. And then maybe that way it's not quite as emotionally loaded, right? Actually, maybe what I want to do is I want to call this hypothesis driven. I'm going to call this experience driven, and then that feels a lot better because then that way, right? Like you're not making a wrong choice. I think one sec. One of the problems with writing about product management is that you never want to insult your reader, right? As an example, many times product managers will need to work in a waterfall model. And I know that waterfall is a word that sounds very poisonous, right? Like typically product managers, like software product managers should always be working in Scrum or Agile. And waterfall is like this, like, it's like backwards or like it takes too long or whatever. But many times waterfall is actually a very valid way of building products. Sorry. It's a very valid way of building products because it depends on the kind of business or the kind of pain that you're trying to solve. If you're trying to launch this really, really, really large initiative where there are a lot of dependencies, waterfall is sometimes the right way to do it. And so we need to be careful with the words that we use because we don't want to insult our audience. One sec, sorry. I don't know why there's like a frog in my throat or something. So I think quick time check, right? So I'm 20 minutes in. I don't want to spend way too much time just looking at the inventory here because I think wow, okay, I don't know what's going on. I don't want to spend too much time on the inventory because I can always flesh this out later, right? I can always add kind of more attributes to flesh out. What I really need to start getting into is how do I actually like make the decision? So so sorry, give me just 1 second. Okay, so I think what I want to do here is I want to be able to call out a couple of different juxtapositions of, sorry, not juxtaposition, contrasts between these two roles in terms of like a spectrum, right? And so what I want to do is I want to make this feel a lot more binary for each of the different attributes, almost kind of like the, what's it called? Almost like the Myers-Briggs personality test, right? Kind of, even though it's a spectrum, what Myers-Briggs does is it has kind of, these 4 different attributes, and they have like 2 poles on each attribute, and then you wind up with kind of, you wind up being somewhere along these different poles, and then you get some sort of like four-letter code, and so there's like these like 16 different kinds of personality types with that. And so I think we can do something similar here. I'm not gonna. Actually, do I want this to be a Myers-Briggs-like test? I'm not sure. Myers-Briggs with attributes. I'm not sure yet, but we'll work through this. I think also I want to boil down each attribute to be a lot more binary for simplification purposes. Call out that we are going to be doing of generalization. And so what I mean by that is, as an example, when we say there's like a B2C companies versus B2B no, not that one. So new product launch versus trying to scale a product, right? New product launch, one of the kind of core hypotheses is that if you want to be a new products person, you need to lean a lot more heavily into kind of the sales and marketing side of things. We're trying to do a lot of discovery and a lot of convincing people to try out your product for the first time. Whereas when you're a growth PM, you're really focused on moving the numbers, right? And so kind of this here is a lot more qualitative, and this here is a lot more quantitative. And so I think what I want to do, and again, I haven't figured it out yet, but maybe if it's like, do you prefer being more qualitative or quantitative? Qualitative, better suited for new products. Quantitative, better suited for scaling products. But again, like that's not necessarily true, because when you're trying to launch a new product for the first time, you still need to be quantitative, where you are where you do a lot of that like market assessment, right? So what is my total addressable market? Kind of what is the different competition space? How do I drive all of this modeling of like conversion rates of, is this actually a legit product or not? And then it's also not true that if you're doing a scaling product that you're never qualitative, right? You still should interview users to really understand what are their pains, because that then unlocks different A/B tests that you can do, or unlocks different ways in which you can redo your onboarding flow to scale your product better. And so I think just one of the things I need to be careful about when I am positioning this is, what is it called? Is just making it clear that I'm very much overgeneralizing, and that you will always need a mix of all of these different attributes as you're going. And so I think what I'm trying to get to is, here are these different kinds of PMs, and then here's like an oversimplified, like, what do you prefer type thing. And then we can use that to then help you lean towards what kind of PM you want to be. Again, it's not necessarily my favorite approach in the world. I think one of the challenges of writing, which is kind of similar to the challenges of shipping a product, is many times in the ideation phase, or in the wireframing phase, it'll seem really compelling. But then when you actually go build it out, you're like, ugh, it doesn't really do what I want it to do. And so then many times you have to refactor it, or you have to restructure it. So we're going to run with this for now, and we're going to see how far we get. And so then basically B2C vs B2B. How do I want to boil this down? Is more on directly solutioning with the customer, yes, running experiments at scale. Small co vs large co, more autonomy or more rigor. I don't know that I like this one. This one's not that great. So I'm going to put a pin in that. And then, again, I'm partially cheating by looking at my own book that I've written, just so that way I don't forget anything. There's like a mobile vs web PM. There's like UX vs technical PM. Do you prefer visual design, or do you prefer being more technical? And then it's like design is going to be more like mobile or web, and then technical is going to be like API or platform or integrations. prefer working with, do you prefer solving your colleagues' pain, or do you prefer having external customers, right? And then that'll be like colleagues are going to be like internal productivity platforms. And then this breaks down into like two different ones, right? So there's like ops platforms. So for example, like when you're working with like DoorDash for their support teams, like DoorDash, Uber, Lyft, right? Kind of all of these marketplaces have these really, really large operations teams, and you need to build these productivity platforms for them that no one ever sees, no one ever notices, and kind of these might be platforms that you build in-house, or they might be fine-tuning existing platforms. And so one of the things that I had done in the past is I was this, back when I was at Movoto as a group product manager, one of the things that I did was I was building out a Salesforce platform for our call operators, because basically our call operators need to be able to take people's inbound leads of, hey, I want to look at an open house, versus connecting them to a real estate agent of, hey, well, let me take you on the open house, right? And so kind of having call operators in the center to make that traffic flow well was really, really important. And so we were building out this operations platform, right? So there's that, but there's also like tech platforms, like for example, like A/B testing frameworks, right? Or like data pipelines is something like that, right? And then like external customers is going to be more like mobile or web. And so like mobile is like native apps, and then like web is going to be more like what is it called? Is like more like a e-commerce potentially. I need to go figure out how I want to make this classification. I'm not really a fan of this, so I'm going to work through that a little bit more later. I think one of the challenges here is that there's some nesting here. And what I mean is, what is it called? Is for some of the kinds of product managers that are out there, it's like a multi-step process. Kind of like being like a new products PM versus a scaling PM only takes one fork in the road. But when we say like, oh, like, are you like an internal ops platform PM, or are you some other kind of PM? That takes multiple hops, right? Because it's like, oh, well, first, do I care more about solving for internal stakeholders, or do I care more for external stakeholders? And then on top of that, am I more about working with people? Am I more about working with technical stuff, right? And so like that's something that takes 2 steps to jump to. I'm wondering if I can make that happen in 1 step. Basically, one of the things that you're seeing me do live here, and honestly, I'm not very good doing this live in front of an audience, is is working through information architecture, where a lot of the concepts in software product management are kind of nuanced, and the thing is making a decision of how nuanced do we want to be, where we are able to paint a realistic picture, but on the flip side, not making it so nuanced that no one can follow, right? So that's one key decision that I have to go make. Another thing that is important is consistency. And so even though there might be some things that are nested more layers down and other things that are like easier at a higher level, I want that to be more consistent kind of as people are working through it. So I've got some more things to struggle through, but at least I have some thoughts here now. Discovering what kind of PM you want to be. And so I think this section is going to be about, this section is going to be probably around 500 words. So for context, so typically my articles, I try to aim for about like 1.5K words, so 1,500 words, up to about 2.5K. That's generally the sweet spot in terms of making sure that I go deep enough in detail that people learn something from it, but not so much in detail that you fall asleep trying to read it. And so one of the things I just need to be careful with is I don't want to overstuff any particular section, because if I overstuff it, then it means that there's less, we're going to be able to pay less attention to the other topics, right? So I think this probably sits in like the 500 word range. This one might sit in the 500 word range itself, and then this one's probably going to be in like the 1,000 word range, and so then this whole thing's going to be about like 2,000 words, and so then 2,000 words is something like a 12-minute read, I think. You don't, well, I don't want people to try to spend 20 minutes reading something just because it takes a lot of time, and so I generally want to be aiming for sub 15 minutes, but I want it to be over 8 minutes, right? Because if it's just 5 minutes, then I probably haven't gone deep enough into talking about the topic. So there's that. And then I think the other thing is just I think this is more like how can you start making decisions of how you break this down. But I think the other thing that I really want to call out is that like these aren't set in stone, right? And so it's road map mentality, not set in stone. You can always pivot later as you learn more, and as you move towards XYZ kind of PM, there will be some skills gap. Need to prioritize the skills that you want to obtain in a roadmap. And so basically what I'm trying to get to, right, is say that I am currently an API product manager, right? But what I really, really think I want to do is I want to become a mobile gaming product manager, right? Well, if I want to be a mobile gaming product manager, I need to learn a lot of stuff. I need to learn user experiences. I need to learn about acquisition funnels. I need to learn A/B testing, etc. And it's not fair to any of us to say, oh, I'm going to gain all these skills tomorrow, right? Like tomorrow is too short. Even if we said, by next year, that is still a very short period of time, especially if we're currently working our jobs. And so with that, we need to prioritize. We need to iterate on our way there. And so that means we need to say, okay, well, out of these, what's more important, right? Is it more important that I learn how to do A/B testing? Is it more important that I learn how to do acquisition funnels? Is it more important that I know how to generate virality? Is it more important that I know how to build on mobile? Is it more important that I learn user experiences? And based on whatever it is that you decide you want to prioritize, then you have a much more targeted game plan of, okay, how am I going to go grow that skill, right? Once you've prioritized, you can then come up with the plan to move towards there. And then probably the last thing I want to do is Clement's personal experience. I think one of the things that helps a lot is talking about at least one person's real experience, because that brings frameworks to life. It makes it a lot easier to understand, what is it called? It makes it a lot easier to understand kind of how these things actually play out in the real world versus how they don't. And so one of the things I want to do is I want to dissect my own experiences of where I was proactive, where I was reactive, and how that helped me kind of move towards the kind of product manager I wanted to be, right? So talk about proactive modes, wanting to launch products 0 to 1, wanting to later scale products, and then talk about reactive modes. And again, this is the wrong word, right? Like it should be more hypothesis-driven versus experience-driven. And so I'll fix this later once I actually have all my thoughts down on paper. And so never asked for it, but became an integrations PM. And learned a lot of valuable skills here. So yeah, so there's that. So I think, and conclusion. And so you can see that this whole thing is really, really messy, right? Like it's not super clear. The kind of thread that's running through this is not the greatest, but that's okay because right now I'm still in the ideation phase. It doesn't need to be super tight. I think a lot of it is, once you start fleshing out the content, you can start saying, okay, these different themes all fit together, and then these different themes don't fit together. And then we can use that to then say, okay, what's going to make it into this article versus what are we going to cut out or what are we going to split into a separate article. And so I think now I am going to try to start writing. And so the thing that I'm aiming at is I want to see these ideas play together. I'm not trying to actually write the final draft of the article. There's no point trying to write the final draft because a lot of times you want to first kind of explore and test to see kind of, is this the right framework? Is this something that's going to be compelling? And then from there, then we can look at it and say, okay, here are the places where it's breaking down. Here are the places that make sense, and we can use that to go look at it. I'm gonna take a quick bio break first, and then I'll be back in 2 minutes. So see you in 2 minutes, and from there, then I'm gonna go try to write this out. Alrighty, see you in a sec. Okay, all right, I am back, and I guess a couple of clarifying context for people who are watching the stream. I've not streamed before. This is, how to phrase it? This is my second time ever streaming. I definitely don't have the right setup of stuff. A lot of this is more kind of, how to phrase it? A lot of this is more kind of not A/B testing, beta testing for me to better understand kind of what are the technologies that are working or not, what are the things that I'm good at doing, things I need to improve for the next time, what's kind of like the software that I need to do some setup, etc. For right now, for folks who are watching on YouTube, I fiddled with the comment section, and so right now it looks like only subscribers can comment or chat live. I do have a second monitor over here to my right, and so I occasionally look over there. So if you subscribe to the Product Teacher channel, you should be able to chat. And so I do look at that every 5-ish minutes or so. And yeah, I think one of the things that I'm still trying to learn is how many folks are actually watching live versus catching it later. I think one of the challenges is because I'm on Pacific time, not everyone is going to be here with me live. And so I don't know how much value there is enabling live chat. But yeah, feel free to let me know in the comments or send me an email, reach out to me on Patreon, etc. in terms of what makes more sense for commenting, chatting, etc. Because I do want to make sure that I am answering your questions, but still focusing on the actual live stream itself and showing you how I write. So, yeah. So with that out of the way, as I mentioned before, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to write some ideas. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be very messy, and that's okay. That's actually part of the creation process of, let's just get all of our thoughts down on paper, so then that way we can start wrestling with it. So I don't expect perfection here. What you will see on the screen is going to be very, very different from what you'll actually see published. And the reason for that is because we want to see kind of the different shape of the ideas, and we want to see, do they fit in this way or should they fit in a different way? And then from there, kind of then we can make sure that kind of that central thread across makes a lot more sense. I think one of the things that I've generally found is when I see my ideas on paper, I can then struggle with them on paper and work through it a lot easier, rather than trying to have this magical thing come out of my head. I think it's because of this that I typically take somewhere between 8 to 10 hours to write an article, because first I need to come up with some sort of outline. That outline might take anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour, depending on me trying to work through what makes a compelling discussion, and they're kind of then fleshing out all of the different topics within the outline. That might take me another 3 to 4 hours, and then kind of restructuring things, editing things so that way there's a core narrative to it is another 1.5 to 2 hours. And then kind of all of the preparing to publish stuff, so like making sure I have like a cover, making sure that I figured out the title and all that fun stuff, scheduling things for social media, then that will be kind of like the remaining time. So I certainly don't want to subject people to having to sit with me for 8 straight hours. That's really long. And transparently, I also don't typically write articles from start to finish in a single session. Right? I think one of the things that is important is that we take a step back from the work that we do so that we can reflect on it and we can come at it from different angles. One of the really important concepts that I really keep in mind is that there are 2 different modes of thinking. There's like a focused mode of thinking, which I think we call, I think that kind of thinking is called spotlight thinking. And so with spotlight thinking, like you're really focused on a single thing and you're really just trying to execute on it. And then there's this more like diffuse thinking, like, what is it called? I think it's called street lamp thinking. I don't quite remember. Where basically, because you're a lot more relaxed and you're not thinking about the topic, right? Like this is when you're like going on a walk, or when you're taking a shower, when you're not focusing on a thing. That's when you start to come up with other ideas and try to piece them together, right? And so it's important to switch in between these 2 modes so that way when you're focusing, right, you actually make the thing happen, right? You don't want to sit there with just an idea for forever. You want to actually execute on it, bring the idea to life. But you don't want to just blindly hammer at the idea. You want to take a step back and see, is this headed down the direction I want it to go, or do I want to be changing that, right? So there's that. So I've been blabbering on for a while, and I know that you aren't here just to listen to me talk. So let's just get started with writing and see what happens. What I'll typically do is I'll typically still leave my outline somewhere. I don't want to just delete it, because this helps me remember what were the different thought processes that I've already traversed. So that way I don't like go back again, and I can make sure that whatever I'm writing is still making sense. And so this is the one I'm going to do first. And so I'm gonna do this. Okay. Discovery. Okay, I can't figure out the intro or the transition for this, so I'm going to leave that for later. And so I'm just going to talk about the topics now and see what happens. Something like that. Again, there's going to be a lot of editing that I need to get into. It's not my favorite positioning, but we'll get there. The more spoken about path. Also, I don't know which one I want to talk about first. Because I feel like most people know about want to work through the top-down approach or this more hypothesis-driven approach. And so I feel like maybe this is the one that comes first. Again, I don't know the sequencing yet. And so I want to just first get the ideas out. Like once the ideas are out, then we can work on the sequencing and kind of how we want to position them together. It's less important right now for me to get the right sequence and more important for me to just have the ideas on paper so then that way I can start putting them together. It's not horrible. I think, yeah, 132 words. So I think what's happened here so far. So I've now separated like hypothesis-driven from experience-driven. There's more work that I need to do to clean them up, and there's more work to do to position them with one another. But I'm going to leave that for now because I want to try to get into some other pieces here. The thing that I'm really worried about is I'm worried about this article turning into just an inventory discussion, which is not the goal, right? Like I have other content that already addresses the different kinds of PMs that are out there. And so I need to figure out how can I quickly survey, by the way, here are the different kinds of PMs, and then really focus on how do we start making decisions. So yeah, so we're gonna go give this a shot and see what happens. Something, I don't know. I'm not a fan, but we'll Again, we don't have to fall in love with our writing the very first time that we do it, because the whole thing is just to get things out on paper. So yeah. I don't remember the what is the other one here? FANG stands for Apple. I knew that. Weirdly, Microsoft isn't in here. I don't really like that. Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Google acronym, Amazon. Fangam? Has anyone ever heard of Fangam before? Whatever. Okay. I'll figure this out later. How do we include Microsoft in here? Which happens to be B2C PM at large. Focus on scaling. Okay, something like that. It's not terrible. And then what I got to do is I got to figure out how to make this part cleaner. But that's okay. This is good enough. Not the strongest transition. There's too many times that I say the word different, and I need to position this more strongly. But again, now I at least know, once I've written it, that one of the core arguments is it's okay for us to be different from other people. Like we are not cookie cutter. We are a diverse industry, and it matters. It actually really matters because people who are much better at working with external stakeholders are not necessarily going to succeed as internal platform PMs. And people who are much better at working with internal colleagues, they're not necessarily going to succeed in working with end users who sit outside the company, right? And that's okay because we do need to have both kinds of products. For Uber to succeed, they need to be able to have internal support people help out drivers and riders. But of course, they also need to have driver user experiences, and so that's B2B, and they need to have rider user experiences, and that's B2C. And so that's completely okay. So yeah, so something that I will need to go figure out later is how do I want to position this, and that's okay. So I'll get to this in a little bit. Purposely oversimplified. And then I probably want to have some examples here, e.g. Netflix, B testing framework, e.g. Uber, I feel like everyone knows what external products are, so I'm not a fan of doing it this way. But at the same time, I do want there to be similar structure between them, so I'll figure this out later. Um, there's this. The reason why I'm slowing down here a little bit is that I know that there are some concepts of trailblazers versus road pavers. And so what is that trailblazer PM product manager? There's something in here that is different kinds of product managers. Nope, that's not good. Oh, this. Okay, I'm gonna want to make sure that I cite Sachin Rekhi. He's a really solid author, by the way, so check him out. Cite builder, tuner, innovator. That said, I don't necessarily agree with this. Like this, I think you can actually collapse builders and tuners together, and so you have like innovators versus tuners. And so again, I think the framework is valid up to a point. I'll want to reflect on it and see the pieces that I resonate with and the pieces that I don't resonate with. So there's that. Trailblazer, we're going to be more focused on 0 to 1, i.e. launching new products in. This is going to be focused a lot more on maybe I want to call this like a reinforcer. Is that even a word? I think it's a word. Anyhow. So that's something there, right? And then this one. Hmm. Basically what I'm trying to get to here is just saying that, I don't want people to feel like this is the PM Bible, right? Like there are lots and lots of different kinds of PM, many of which are being evolved over time, right? I mean, like platform PM, I haven't even talked about VR or AR yet, right? But I think this is a decent initial cut. And I think the nice thing is that I'm just thinking out loud. Somewhat the nice thing here is that it does give you some way of having these independent attributes for looking at product, right? So you can be an external B2B product manager who's focused on scaling at a large company, and your focus is on data. And like these are all very distinct things. They're not necessarily conflated, so that's good. Um, and then I can be like an internal operations PM trying to scale an existing thing or trying to launch a new thing at a small versus a large company. I think that's also legit. Um, and as an internal PM, I can be mobile versus web. I can be data versus platform. Yeah, yeah. It's not terrible. It's not the best, but it's not terrible. And so one of the things I just want to do real quick is I just want to make sure that like this is actually right. So I'm gonna do like IE C. Sorry, this is wrong. Transparently, this one is a much more complicated topic than I expected it to be. And so I'm just working through this. Trailblazer versus reinforcer, small vs large, and then surprisingly, I don't think I've repeated any letters, which is actually super nice. Nope, I did. T. I is innovator. Anyways, I'll figure this out. And so basically, then the different kinds of then there are like 16 different kinds of PMs then, right? So there's the is there 16? There's more than 16 actually, because there's 4 times 2 times 2 times 4. I'm just thinking, is what, 64 kinds of PMs. So I'm not going to cycle through all of this because that's going to take me forever. But I think the point is that there are lots of these different attributes that we can use to look at product, right? And that this is a much more granular view than simply assuming that the only kind of product manager out there is the Facebook PM, which is um, an external B2C scaling large company web PM, right? Like that's the core Facebook archetypical PM, and just there are so many other dimensions that we need to consider when we're thinking about becoming a product manager, right? So yeah, let me just think here. Yeah, so I'll deal with this a little bit later. So there's this. Oh, by the way, I have lost track of time. Time flies when we're having fun. So I'm 20 minutes over. Whoops, sorry about that. So I'm going to stay on for another 9-ish minutes, so 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then I'm going to sign off and make lunch. But I do want to just continue to poke at this a little bit, because I think what we have here is I think we've got something compelling around there are these clearly different attributes of product, right? And each of these very much is a different kind of role, and so this is good. I think there is a lot of value here in terms of, okay, we've got some sort of questionnaire that we can use to start thinking about how we want to lean into product. I think this is starting to yeah, so this questionnaire is good. And then I think the thing that I need to do is make the steps more clear. Because right now, there's not like a clear 1, 2, 3, right? Like it's not actionable. The thing that I always want to do with my content is I want people to be able to actually take action with it. And so one of the action items is to actually go do this questionnaire, and we'll see, okay, so I'm going to be generally this kind of PM. But it's too fuzzy. Like what are the steps that come before this, if there's any? What are the steps that come after, if there are any? And so that's also something I want to get to, is what specifically are the steps that I should be taking to figure out what kind of PM I want to be, and then move in that direction, is what I really want to get to. How do I make this more actionable? How do I make this more actionable? Product market fit. Because I think what's happening here, right, is we say, this is the kind of PM that I think I want to be. We should validate a hypothesis, right? And so we should talk to people. And then once we talk to them, then we have that actual roadmap mentality, right? And so here I'm missing something of validating your. Yeah, and so as an example, right, like I happen to be I'm a B2B new product launch, small company, web PM that leans more um, user experience oriented, right? And so then with that framing, you know that I'm that kind of PM. And so when I talk about stuff, it's going to be from that lens. Um, and I think, that's very different if you're reading about someone who was a Google Maps PM versus if you're reading about someone who is like a data visualization PM, right? Um, so one of the things that we need to do when we are trying to validate hypotheses is that when we're reading, we can't just read the content that's there. We also need to put in a lens of, okay, but from what perspective are they speaking, right? So there's that. I don't quite know how to fit that idea in yet. And the other thing that I'm a little worried about is this is starting to get really long. I don't know that I can fit all of this in. I'm starting to wonder whether my personal experience fits or whether this hypothesis validation fits. And so I'm going to need to start making hard trade-offs of what's in, what's out. So that's stuff I'm going to need to work through. All right. Okay, so validating your hypothesis. Exploring your interests, small or large. Yeah, I think one of the things that you're seeing here is that as I work through an article, I want to try to attack the areas where there are some unknowns. And what I mean by that is I'm not, these are the places where I'm not sure how I'm going to execute on it. And so I want to see, what is my execution on it. But how do I phrase this? One of the things about writing, or just content creation in general, whether you're preparing a presentation or whether you're creating a deck or whether you are gearing up for a podcast or what have you, is your mind will be in kind of different energy states, right? Kind of sometimes your mind's going to be a lot more in that like very creative state, where you're eager to go struggle through lots of different problems, and it's okay that you're making quote unquote backwards progress. And what I mean by that is, you try a thing, you don't like it, you delete all of it, and that's okay. And then the other times when we are not really in the ideation phase, we just want to execute, and so we want to do like the stuff that's easier or not easier, the stuff that's more straightforward that we know we can just hammer out. And so it's important for us to monitor our own energy when we're trying to write, of kind of what mode am I in right now. And so transparently, right now I'm in a lot more in that like ideation mode of I'm okay writing stuff and having that stuff be bad, and I'm happy to like go rework it later. But that's very different if I am kind of this like crush it out execution mode. I hate deleting things when I'm in that like execution mode, and so I think when I'm in that ideation mode, I'm okay kind of stubbing out these different pieces and having them kind of float there and then like rework them. And then when I'm executing, I want to kind of just like tie things in a bow, and kind of knock out the things that are a lot easier. And so as an example, I think this is very ideation. I have never done a quiz before or a questionnaire before in writing. And so this is very new to me. And so I'm okay kind of struggling through that information architecture. And I'm not in the execution mode yet. But if I'm in the execution mode of just like purely write, I think this is the stuff that I would go do, right? Kind of, I already know all the different concepts that I want to talk about here, and I can just crush all of this out, and I am not going to go backwards. I'm not going to write it and then say, oh, I don't really like this, I'm going to get rid of it, I'm going to restructure it. Like whatever I get down on paper is likely close to its final form. And so I think one of the things that is helpful is as you're working through content, understanding what kind it is. Is it more experimental? Is it more like ideation oriented, or is it more I already know what I'm gonna say, and so I just need to go say it, right? So here again, like I don't know what I want to say yet, and so it's okay for me to be working through this stuff. I don't fully know what I want to say here yet, but I definitely know what I want to say here. And what I don't want to do is, when I'm in ideation mode, to just crush out the execution part, because that's the wrong energy. And what I don't want to do is, when I want to just crush out stuff, to be struggling through this ideation mode, because then I'm going to really, really suffer. And so kind of those are just things to keep in mind kind of as we are creating things. All right, well, unfortunately, I do have to end the stream here. It is now 11:30, and I do have to get started in terms of making lunch and kind of handling my weekend household chores. So thanks so much for joining me on stream. Really, really appreciate it. As always, really appreciate your support on Patreon. I wouldn't be able to do things like this without your continued support. So, thanks so much for joining me on this ride. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, you'll see this actually turn into a real article. So I'm going to be struggling through this a little bit more. And hopefully this was really insightful, just hearing me kind of talk through my thoughts out loud and kind of seeing the different resources that I'm drawing on and kind of working through the reality of creating content. So again, thanks so much. Have a lovely weekend, and I will catch you on the next live stream in a month.